Alhamdulillah, nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruhu wa nu'minu bihi wa natawakkalu alayh wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina man yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu wa man yudlilhu fala hadiya lahu wa nashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu ونشهد أن سيدنا وسندنا وشفيعنا محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قد أفلح من زكاها صدق الله العظيم اللهم صل وسلم وبارك وارحم على عبدك ورسولك سيدنا محمد النبي الأمي وعلى آله وسلم تسليما. One of the most difficult things to purify our heart of is when we have a wish or a desire and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes something happen in our life that is contradictory to that wish or desire. So much so that it may appear to us, or some people may feel in their heart, as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is contradicting and going contrary to our wishes and desires. Now this is not obviously when our wish and desire is something against Sharia or something against the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No, the problem arises, the difficulty that arises in the heart of a person is when their wish and desire was for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when their wish and desire was in order to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or their wish and desire was based on trying to fulfill a role that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had put them in vis-a-vis maybe different interpersonal relations. But despite their best intention or despite their best action, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clearly wanted something absolutely contrary, absolutely opposite to that. Now, if a person at that point is not able in their heart to feel yaqeen in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and do tawakkul and trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's a danger that their yaqeen becomes weak, their ta'alluq ma'Allah becomes weak. There's a danger that their ruju' ilallah, their turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, become weak. There's a danger that their mahabba, the love they have for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in their heart, that might become weak. There's so many dangers that come in this situation unless a person has an understanding, and better that they have developed that understanding before such a thing happens, so that when it happens, they're able to rely and trust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, so one reason why this is difficult is that the person will say, well, all the time I was relying on Allah ta'ala and trusting in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and everything is happening opposite to what I wanted or what I planned or what I thought Allah ta'ala wanted me to do. So I don't know how to rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or trust in Him. Or a person finds himself in a trap where they just don't even know how they should proceed. So this is something that some of the people of tasawwuf would sometimes write about or speak about, and sort of what sometimes we call, quote unquote, their high level esoteric works. But this is what they used to call maqam at-tafweez or maqam at-taslim, that sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings you to a point where you just have to submit to Him without any hope, without any expectation, without any outwardly apparent help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is like a pure level of tawakkul, a very intense level of tawakkul Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which obviously requires a very intense level of yaqeen. It's an absolute sense of unconditional submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, what's the trust aspect here is that you're trusting blindly that whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to happen to you is better. Although, if you open your eyes, it will appear to you that whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making happen to you is far from better, is far from what you would have considered better. The second aspect of this level of taslim and tafweez is that there is nothing you can do. You are now giving up, and this is not something to be done in all circumstances and all situations, but in this type of situation, you are giving up all asbab. You're giving up all tadbir. You're giving up all planning, all strategy, all thinking, all talking, all networking, and then you're giving up all action, all steps. This is a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it can bring a person very close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It doesn't necessarily bring success in the matter or success in the world. Success lies in our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So sometimes in life you may be successful in building your relationship with Allah ta'ala through failure and setback and adversity in this world. And at other times in life you may, at the expense of your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, find ways to be successful in this world. And a lot of people take that route. And this is a big mistake that people make, is that rather than assess or evaluate themselves based on their ta'alluq ma'Allah or their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as measured, for example, in how much they can pray salah, or how long they can linger in their salah, or how much they recite Quran, or how much they make dua, or how much they cry out of love for Allah ta'ala, or cry out of fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or cry out of concern for the ummah. Rather than assess and evaluate themselves on this basis, which is the heart's relationship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, instead people evaluate themselves on the outward success, on the success of their plan of action, on the success of their tadbir. So and they are successful in those things. So they keep evaluating themselves very positively, very highly, such that they may even enter a level of delusion, self-delusion, ghurur. So this is a hidayah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a guidance that is actually coming as a rahmah, a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that in order to break and sometimes outright shatter that ghurur. And the reason I say this word is because actually self-delusion and self-deception, normally, it's not something that goes away gently. It's not something that goes away gradually. It's something that needs to be shattered. It's something that needs to be broken. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-Qawiyyul Mateen. He is the being of absolute power and absolute might. Ala kulli shay'in qadir. He has power over all things. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not break and shatter that person's self-delusion, then actually that person will go so deep into that self-delusion that they will become entirely unaware of their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The only thing they're aware of and track is their success in their planning, success in their mission, success in their strategy, success in their, and the outcome of their actions. So this aspect of taslim and tafweez, ufawwidhu amri ilallah, that I transfer, I hand over entirely, such that I acknowledge that I have no capacity, I have no capability, I acknowledge my powerlessness, and therefore I submit myself to the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I acknowledge my complete lack of knowledge. I turn myself over to the fact that Allah ta'ala is al-Alim, and He knows everything. This is done, as I was mentioning, to shatter that self-delusion. So then what a person has to do is give up. So it's not about, it's not, what they say, back to the drawing board. No, the drawing board is broken. Drawing board is gone. Do not pick up the drawing board. The lesson to be learned is precisely this: do not go back to the drawing board. Stop relying on the drawing board. Stop relying on your problem-solving, troubleshooting ability. Stop relying on those people who you turn to help you in counseling. Now again, this is not a blanket thing. Many times, you do have to go back to the drawing board. Many times, you do have to turn to people who help you, who advise you and counsel you. I'm talking about a specific thing. a specific way, if you will, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala purifies the heart of someone is He takes away the drawing board, or renders it useless, renders it futile. And so at that point the person is more like back to the musalla, back to the mushaf, means back to nawafil, back to tilawa, back to dua, back to munajat. And it's very often the case, it's not even back to, it's beginning. Turn to those things as opposed to all of these other asbab and means and mechanisms and processes and causalities. So to turn to Allah Ta'ala in a way in which you abandon all of those things, that is called taslim and tafweez. Now what happens is, now this is a kind of disease of the heart. Our heart becomes too fond of, or maybe not fond of, our heart becomes too attached and entrenched in our strategy, in our thinking, in our problem solving, in our troubleshooting. So it's very hard to let go. And a person thinks, no, I will make dua to Allah Ta'ala and I will pray and I will do all of that, but I need to sit down and figure things out. I need to sit down and plan the way forward. Again, many times this is the right thing to do. I'm talking about a particular one aspect that can happen occasionally to people, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually doesn't want you to do that at that moment. So how can you tell? That one sign of this is if you sit down and try to do that, you will just dig yourself deeper, or you will make things worse. Or if you don't make things worse, you certainly won't be able to make anything better. Because the point is turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala entirely. One reason we mention that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will do this to a person out of His hidayah, guidance and rahman, mercy, is to take them out of the self-delusion. A second reason is to break their yaqeen on asbab, because that was threatening the person's yaqeen on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what happens, and so this is a very anti-scientific thing, right? That science is going to tell you to correlate and corroborate causalities, and if they keep correlating and they keep corroborating, then you become even more certain of the causality. So this is human nature, right? They feel that, no, every time I did it this way it was correct, when I did it that way it was incorrect, so I'm learning. This is how we're trained, right? In any type of training, any type of learning, education, trial and error. Learn from trial and error. Learn from your mistakes. Repeat your successes. Increase your successes. Again, at one level, all of that is beneficial and all of that has merit and all of that can be very worthwhile and beneficial for a person. But there's another level, that sometimes a person, their heart gets too attached to this. So their heart needs to be purified. In other words, they have yaqeen in processes and means other than Allah Ta'ala at the level at which they were supposed to have yaqeen in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself. And only Allah Ta'ala can purify the heart of that. So maybe I should also explain, because tonight, again, if you've been following this series, I've been trying to talk about purification of the heart in different ways. Different from the standard textbook way that we are going to learn about the diseases of the heart and we are going to purify our heart. So tonight I'm fixing the second part. Many times Allah Ta'ala purifies our heart in ways that we never imagined, we never could have thought of, we could not have planned, we could not have done. And this is a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For the first reason was to take us out of our self-delusion because of the successes of our planning. The second was to take away our yaqeen in the causality of our planning. That no outcomes are based on strategy, outcomes are based on actions. No, Allah Ta'ala wants to purify our heart from that and teach us the lesson that outcome is based on Allah. Outcome is based on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The result is based on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is so counter to everything, that is in the Western educational, corporate, working model. It's even counter to, if you will, common sense and rationality. It's even counter to experience. But that's what deen is. This is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge is transcendent. This is why He's al-alim, He's a'lam. He is the all-knowing, and His knowledge far surpasses, far exceeds, far transcends anything that me and you can know. sometimes, so another reason, the next reason, I've lost count here, either third or fourth reason that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does this is that because, so one, as I said, He wanted to turn us away from the asbab, from the means. Second is sometimes Allah ta'ala wants to turn you away from an outcome. So it may be an outcome that you very successfully obtained. And maybe you did successfully obtain that for His sake and for His pleasure. But Allah ta'ala doesn't want you on that outcome anymore. And you'll never leave it yourself, because now anything a human being attains through their own sincere effort and hard work and action, they're loath to give it up, because that is the fruit of their labor. And for whatever reason, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala no longer wants you to have that fruit anymore. So He will, in order to take you away from that outcome, He will bring you to this position where you must make this absolute taslim and tafweez. And in earlier times, people, they understood this, and they also had this gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or you can say quote unquote luxury, that they could disconnect from the world and turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in worship, in ibadah, in dua, in tawbah, in reflection, in fikr, and just leave all these worldly things and worldly processes. What's more difficult in our day and age is that generally all of us are much more caught up in the world. We're way too entrenched, over-connected in the world. We are mired in the world. The world is like a net that has ensnared us. So then a person finds himself in a situation, let's say they even understood all of this, right? And say, okay, no, this is the time for me to do tafweez. This is the time for me to do taslim. This is the time for me to leave everything and just to ruju ilallah. But they can't do that, right? They can't do that because maybe there's so many other things pulling them back in. There's people in their lives who are still trying to connect them to those processes and means and outcomes. There are realities, maybe people have financial needs. There's so many impetuses in this world that keep a person connected to this world. So then it will require an even greater tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to flee from all those impetuses, to flee from all those imperatives, and to just cut all those things off and turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So like in Islamic history, I can be reminded of the famous Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala, and this is what he did. Otherwise he would have had, he was such a famed and renowned scholar. There would have been students who would have traveled to be with him, and he probably thought, how can I leave them? They've traveled across the Islamic world to come study with me. There's family members, there's relatives, there may be other junior scholars who he was supporting, and if he leaves, then the rest of the administration may, I'm just, hypothesizing, but the administration will be upset with those other junior scholars. There could be so many things that if he had thought about it, he wouldn't have gone away, right? So if you know his story, he, after becoming extremely qualified alim of deen, an extremely proficient scholar, and he actually entered, his mom sent him to madrasa because they were so poor that he had even very little food to eat. So it's what today people say happens in the madaris and the homes today. Actually, that was a phenomenon for some people in the past, but he became such a proficient, profound scholar, right? That he had one of the highest positions in, let's say, academia in the Islamic world at that time. And so many students and scholars were coming to learn from him. But he realized he had to leave everything in his journey to search for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So this is a journey that he's documented in his book Al-Munkir min al-Dalal, which you can translate in English as Deliverance from Error. We have a whole workshop on that. It's even on the channel. We taught that many years ago. So Imam al-Ghazali did that, right? And one can only imagine the amount of sacrifice and the amount of himmah that he had to do, and he disappeared for 2 years. And then he came back, and for 8 more years he did, a balancing act. He was it was mostly withdrawn, but still somewhat engaged. But this is how, this is one example in history. But in this day and age, the world is so much more convoluted, so much more entrenched. Now, if we don't submit to Allah Ta'ala's purification of the heart in this manner as I've described from the start of this talk, then there's a very dangerous illness that a person can fall into. And that dangerous illness is sometimes referred as to displeasure with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's decree, to be displeased, ill-content with the divine decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whereas the reality is that to Allah ta'ala belongs the decree, to Him belongs the command, to Him belongs the amr. Everything can only happen with His idhn, by His warrant, by His leave, by His permission. And then you have people then asking these philosophical questions. Then, well, where is my agency? Right. So there are other places where we try to talk about this to address the confusions of university youth, but that's just one level of discourse, and that's just trying to preserve their iman. The reality is the real answer to this question is you have no agency. All agency is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Who do you think you were as a human being to even dare to ask this question, that what about my free will? What about my action? What about my agency? At one level, that is the answer. That is the answer. Right? And this is one of the many meanings of taqwa also. Taqwa doesn't just mean to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Taqwa means to be aware of Allah ta'ala, to be aware of His status, of His glory, of His magnificence, of His majesty, of His grandeur, of His azma. And by being aware and conscious of that, to be wary of disobeying and disbelieving such a being. So it's not just pure fear. Right? So many times you'll find taqwa translated in English as fear. The words for fear in Quran and Hadith and in Arabic are khawf and khashiyya. Taqwa really would mean to be wary, but then it doesn't sound right in English, right? So to be so aware, so conscious, so conscientious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's might and grandeur that you are extremely wary of disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To be so cognizant of Him, His Zat, His essence, His being, His ma'iyyah, His companionship, that you are wary of ever forgetting Him. It's a different type of dhikr. One is the dhikr of, so this is a different type of remembrance. So sometimes people translate it like that, right? God conscious. And maybe that is a good one. It's not dhikr, remembering Allah Ta'ala out of love or because out of dhikr. No, it's a remembrance because your awareness of Allah Ta'ala prevents you from forgetting Him. That's a type of awareness that taqwa is trying to capture. Because He's so great, He's so mighty, and He is, alaykum raqiba. He is intensely vigilant on you. He is al-alim, all knowledgeable. He's al-khabir, all aware. He's as-sami, is all hearing. He's al-basir, He's all seeing. Because of these things, you can't forget Him. Because of who He is and His might and grandeur and His presence in your life and your heart, you cannot forget Him. That's what taqwa is trying to capture. Now, how do you translate this, right? Because in Quran Kareem it's going to come so many times, muttaqin, and you need 30 English words to translate it. So how is it going to fit in a translation? But this is what taqwa is. So the danger is that a person falls into this displeasure. They become displeased with the decree of Allah Ta'ala. They become displeased with their life. They even then, the worst then, the deepest this disease can go, like the most cancerous it can go, is that al-aman al-hafiz, they become displeased in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself. They become displeased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself. Whereas all the while, they are receiving ni'mah, bounties and blessings from Allah Ta'ala. All the while they're receiving rizq, provision and sustenance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All the while Allah Ta'ala has kept them on iman. All the while Allah Ta'ala still giving them tawfiq to do ta'at, giving them ability and gracious success to still pray salah, to fast, to still do acts of obedience. But still they feel this disillusionment with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They feel this distance with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So then, what a person has to do, along with this taslim and tafweed, entirely submitting their affair to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they must increase in their shukr. And this is something we talked about on the Saturday talk. Right? And I don't want to repeat all of that here, but to go deep in shukr. So the relevant part there was when we talked about shukr in good times, and shukr in bad times. And it's only the person who truly makes shukr in good times will be able to do shukr in bad times. And at that point, in what we're talking about today, a person has to do shukr for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's the complete opposite from being displeased with Allah ta'ala's decree or displeased with life or na'udhu displeased with Allah ta'ala. It's the complete opposite. A person in this situation of taslim and tafweez has to do so much shukr to Allah ta'ala such that they are so razi, they were so pleased and content with Allah ta'ala that they were never as pleased and content with Allah ta'ala even when things were going well or all the outcomes were success or everything was going to plan. This is extremely hard to do. But this is the true path of being pleased and content with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now the way to this, there's no emotional self-help path to this. There's no motivational, inspirational speech to this. There's no taweez or some magical formula for this. The way to this, to adopt taslim and tafweez such that you feel truly content and pleased and radi with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the way to this is what we said before, the musalla and the musaf. The way to this is salah and tilawa and dua. In other words, simply speaking, the way to this is ibadah. And this is the mujahadah a person has to make. A person has to just throw themselves into ibadah, lose themselves in ibadah, do more ibadah, more quantity, more quality, more ibadah. And that's really the blanket solution to all these things, by the way, of purification of the heart. And if a person is not going to increase in their ibadah, they can take as many fancy lessons and read as many fancy books on purification of the heart. They can think of themselves as Sufi as they want. If they do not increase in their ibadah, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. The field, the arena, the forum, the place in which the heart is purified is and will always be the musalla, the mushaf, salah, tilawa, and dua. And dhikr is included in all of that, right? Ibadah. And when a person goes deeper into ibadah is the only cure then for all this clutter that comes in a person's mind and thoughts, all of this, confusion that comes into their heart and their emotions and feelings. And if a person doesn't do that, if they just, as they say, just sit on the chair or stare at the wall or look out the window or sip their tea or call any and every and all of their friends and talk to them about their problems and issues, nothing will happen. And actually all of these things make this illness of discontent and displeasure with Allah's decree, all of these things just increase it. All of returning to all these other sources just increase it. So a person has to go deep into ibadah. And this aspect of taslim and tafweed connects with in the very first session what we talked about. Remember that hadith of Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? That no one with even a drop, an atom, a subatomic particle of kibr, of arrogance, will enter into Jannah. So another reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring a person to this maqam of tafweez and taslim is to break. Not that there was some hugely arrogant person, to break this atom, to break this small amount. And that is normally actually ujub, or vanity or conceit. And that is ujub, a vanity and conceit that is born out of that accomplishment and achievement and success that a person had due to all their strategies and plannings and action. Allahu Akbar Kabira. This is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is why it's so important to be grounded in Quran al-Kareem and to regularly read and study and understand Quran al-Kareem, because otherwise, there's so many sort of shades of understanding of Islam that underemphasize the azmat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's very easy to just have this happy-go-lucky, feel-good understanding of Islam where it's all love and mercy and peace and salawat and Durood Sharif and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and all of that is there, right? But you also have to have that understanding that it's coming throughout Quran al-Kareem of the might and majesty and grandeur of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and of our entire surrender, subjugation, submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our taslim and tafweed and sabr in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, are turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in ibadah as His ibad, and being shakur and radi, and being absolutely grateful and thankful to Allah ta'ala, and be absolutely pleased with Allah ta'ala throughout all of this. And this is something that you see in Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this is something that one sees in the Sahaba Kiram radiyallahu ta'ala anhum ajma'in. Now, it should be clear that when we say that a person should not be displeased with the decree of Allah Ta'ala, it doesn't mean they necessarily have to be pleased at their situation. This is also a mistake people think. Because they try to work on themselves. Okay, I have to accept and be happy with my situation and circumstances. No, you have to be happy with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have to be radhi with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have to be pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have to raditu billahi rabba wa bil islami deena wa bi Muhammadin nabiyya sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You have to take pleasure with that. It doesn't mean you have to be pleased at unpleasant things in your life. But you're taking pleasure in these greater things. You're doing shukr for the greater blessings. A very iman itself will take away the sting or the bitterness or the pain or the hurt of the unpleasant things in your life, so that the unpleasant things in your life do not lead to the disease of making us displeased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself. So to focus on something else, to move our focus away. And if you think about it, naturally we would move our focus away to the strongest emotion that we have. And the strongest emotion a believer has is there being an abd, is there being a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, being a Muslim, a person who does taslim, who submits to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And these things come out the most in ibadah. The more we do ibadah, the more we will outwardly express but inwardly feel the feelings of submission and surrender and worship and slavehood to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when we feel those feelings and we remember that is our core identity, then inshallah all the displeasure with Allah ta'ala will go away, and the pleasure with Allah ta'ala will come. And when we are in our heart truly radhi and content with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then that heart that is radhi and pleased with Allah ta'ala will then feel it, that Allah ta'ala is radhi with them. Radiyatam mardiyya. Radiyatam mardiyya. Right? This gives itminan to the nafs. This gives serenity, tranquility to the nafs. So when a person is radhi, is pleased with Allah ta'ala, they will feel that Allah ta'ala is radhi with them. So then they won't worry about what's happening in their life, because they feel Allah's pleased with me. So even if all the world is displeased with me, or everything about my life is displeasing to me, it doesn't matter, because all of that is drowned and extinguished in the fact that I am pleased with Allah Ta'ala and Allah Ta'ala is pleased with me. And that is the ultimate purification of the heart. So we make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us strong and steadfast. Words are easy to say, living them and practicing them is more difficult. We make dua for ourselves and for all of you and for all of our friends and family and near ones and for the entire ummah, that may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us always and ever pleased with Him, and may Allah ta'ala always and ever be pleased with us, and may Allah ta'ala guide us to all the ibadat, all the virtuous deeds, all the actions, all the emotions that will increase our hearts in being pleased with Him, and that will increase Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure with us. And may Allah ta'ala make this pleasure the purpose and mission of our life, so that inshallah, that with ridwanum millahi akbar, that in the afterlife, in the akhirah, in the next life, we live in a state of bliss and serenity, such that we are forever always pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and He is pleased with us. Wa akhiru da'wana an alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.